After James confided in me about his experience with his great-grandmother's ghost, we didn't really talk about things like again for a while. Even though he believed he may have experienced something and had most likely seen other odd things in his time as a police officer, he still didn't really believe in the paranormal, although he wanted to. Almost like there was a veil in front of his eyes which prevented him from seeing what was really happening in mineral wells. I, on the other hand, had abandoned all hope of talking myself out of believing in this stuff. I was fully invested. I had my next run-in about a year later. James was out sick, the flu I believe, and I responded to a vagrancy call at the old Norwood Hospital. It had been abandoned for some time and we had gotten constant reports that a man was living on the third floor and making a racket at all hours of the night. Initially, the MWPD had sort of looked the other way, the reason for which I was not privy to, but this time I was told to go over there immediately and get him out of there if possible. I arrived just after 10 p.m. and parked my squad car across the street. The Norwood Hospital had been built sometime around 1904, I believe, when Dr. Norwood and his wife had moved to Mineral Wells. It was used as a private hospital, as far as I know, and Dr. Norwood apparently even had some tie to T.B. Baker, but I couldn't recall what it was. As I was walking up to the entrance, I noticed the flicker of a light in the third-story window, most likely a candle, confirming that someone was up there. The front door was still boarded up, but there was a window on the left side of the front of the building that had been broken and all of the glass removed. I pulled out my flashlight and climbed in. The inside of the building had decayed with age and all of the signs you'd expect in a vagrancy were present. There were old clothes on the floor, empty food containers, beer cans, and the place was in extremely poor condition. The smell was awful, too. I checked the first floor and found nothing. There was an open door that appeared to lead to a basement, but I decided that would not be on my agenda for the night. The second floor was much like the first, except there was also a room that looked like it may have been a nursery or a child's play room, littered with old stuffed toys, a rocking horse, and several rotting bunk beds. Just as you'd expect, it creeped me out royally. When I got to the stairs that led to the third floor, I heard something rustling up in the darkness above me. I'm not going to lie, I was not real happy about having to go up there, but the top brass had made it clear that I needed to take care of this tonight. "It's the police," I announced to the black void. "If you're up there, I need you to come down." I sat in silence for a minute, listening. Nothing but the wind outside. I began to slowly ascend the stairs with my flashlight as my guide and my hand on my hip. I swung my flashlight across the room and saw a figure, huddled in the corner under several blankets, covering his face. I began to walk towards him cautiously. I smelled the man before I really saw him. But once I did, I realized the smell was more desirable. He appeared to be in his 50s, but I had the feeling he was much younger. His fingers were gnarled and his face bore the mask of addiction and depression. When he began to mumble, I noticed his teeth were black and crumbling. "Mariana, is that you? Something indecipherable take me. Now? Sir, I need you to show me your hands." "What are you doing up here?" I said. This time, he spoke more loudly. "The children. They won't leave me alone. The poor children. They are missing pieces. Are you here to take me? The children are always playing, they are never quiet. They went to meet the Dr. The water didn't help. They always tell me. I never sleep. Are you here to take me?" There had obviously been no children in this building for quite some time, but maybe his encounter with them had been of a different sort. I stood the man up and searched his person, finding $2 in one pocket and a burnt-up piece of tin foil in the other. I checked his fingers and sure enough he had the telltale signs of long-term methamphetamine use, burnt fingers and all. Meth had always been a relatively serious problem in mineral wells. It's cheap, it can be made with mostly household chemicals, and once they start, they can't escape its grip, often for life. I threatened to arrest him for possession of paraphernalia, but he agreed to tell me where he got the meth from instead, Lions Park as the dope heads called it, a place well known for its drug activity. He didn't have any of it on him, but I did explain to him that he'd be arrested for trespassing. He seemed relieved as I escorted him down the third-floor stairs. Back on the second floor, I noticed something I hadn't before, scrawled in some dark substance on the wall at the bottom of the stairs. The man Victor was his name. It would turn out noticed it too and just started quietly sobbing to himself. We exited as quickly as possible. As I drove off toward the station, I recalled that I had seen a light in the third-floor window when I had first arrived. However, there hadn't been any candles, lit or otherwise, when I had gotten up there. I glanced in my rear-view window at the old hospital receding in the background, expecting to see only darkness, but instead, the telltale spark of a candle flickered back, the wind in the trees carrying the faint laughter of children. Several days later I paid my first visit to Mary Scott. M.S. Scott was known in the community as being a reputable source on mineral wells lore as well as for her discretion. She had taught at one of the local schools in the 70s and 80s and had retired to her small but well-kept estate on the south side of town, outside the city limits. James had actually set us up. She had taught him in kindergarten and then again in middle school. The Norwood incident had pushed me into full investigation mode and I needed some answers. I believed this was as good a start as any. I arrived at her place in mid-afternoon, dressed in plainclothes so as not to attract any attention to myself. Now that I was actively seeking information on paranormal activity in mineral wells, I had to be extra careful. At this point I wasn't even entirely sure I could trust this woman, but I didn't really have any choice. Her home was a small, cozy, brick house tucked several hundred feet off the road. A narrow driveway guided me under the sprawling arms of several mature oaks. There was a small pond off to the side with a weathered dock and several dogs panting about. I knocked on the door and was quickly greeted by a woman who appeared to be in her 60s, considerably shorter than me and just beginning to gray around her temples, with kind eyes and knowing smile. A teacher, for sure, and someone who seemed to be wise beyond her years. She invited me in, and with a thank you, I graciously accepted. After some small talk about James and my move to mineral wells, we sat down in the living room with our iced teas and got down to business. "What can I help you with, dear?" she asked. M.S. Scott, Mary, sorry, I'm not exactly sure how to put this, but I'm just going to come out and say it. I've experienced some things in mineral wells that I can't quite explain rationally, I said with hesitation. Go on, she said, knowingly. Well, there's something odd about mineral wells. I've encountered spirits, or people possessed by spirits, multiple times since I started work here. The problem is, no one else sees them. Does that sound crazy? Tell me something, she started. Do you drink the mineral water? The crazy water, as they call it. No, I don't, I said. I have a bottle at my apartment, but it's currently unopened. Good. Keep it that way, she said, sipping her tea. Most of what I know comes second and third hand from stories passed down through the generations and the rest from countless hours studying old deeds, contracts, journal entries, and any other documents I could get my hands on. You're right, something is rotten in mineral wells, mineral hells as I call it, and it all started with that cursed mineral water old man Lynch summoned from the ground, all those years ago. By all accounts he was a sociopath and a scoundrel. I don't drink it either anymore, and from what I have gathered that's what allows people like us to actually see what's actually going on. Most of the locals have lived on it all their lives. It's made them blind to the true face of this godforsaken town. It also may make them more susceptible to suggestion, even possession, by the other side. Suddenly, several things made sense at once. Pamela was born in mineral wells and lived here her entire life, and I would venture a guess that Ellie and the man at the VA had too. It also made sense now why James wasn't able to come to grips with the things he had seen. What's wrong with the water? I asked. That's a good question. I believe Mr. Lynch tapped into more than he bargained for when he dug that first mineral well. It sparked a chain of events that has somehow caused the dead to remain in mineral wells long after they have passed. The water itself does have extremely high levels of lithium, but I suspect there is something more to it that causes folks to turn a blind eye to the influence the spirits have on our world. There are others though, like us, that know the truth. Mary, there is so much more that I want to know. I started, now getting excited. Do you know anything about Dr. Norwood? I have a feeling he is somehow involved in all of this. Not much, only whispers here and there. A name kept coming up, Mary and I believe. Mariana? I asked, remembering the name hellishly scrawled on the hospital wall. Yes, that's it, Mariana. She went on, she was Dr. Norwood's head nurse for much of the time the hospital was open. I believe he was an osteopath by trade, but there were rumors that something else was going on there, what exactly I'm not sure. Many years ago I heard the records are said to be hidden somewhere in the building, but I couldn't begin to tell you where or if they are there at all. She went on, but the sound of her voice faded from my consciousness and was replaced by a singular picture, the dingy, wooden stairs leading down into the basement at the Norwood Hospital. If the records were still in the building, they were down there. Finding them was the first step in unlocking this mystery. I had to find them. I reluctantly cut our conversation short, thanking Mary and telling her we would meet again. I promised to share any further information I found with her. I got the feeling as I was leaving that she had stuck her neck out by talking to me, and I was grateful for her help. As I drove back down the long driveway under those old oaken sentinels, picturing Mary alone with her tea and her dogs, I felt a feeling of sadness and weight envelop me, like being wrapped in a thick blanket on the bottom of the ocean. I drove on. That night, I parked my squad car across the street from the Norwood as I had several days earlier. I was on the clock and could easily explain my purpose for being here if questioned about it. And sure enough, as I stepped out of my vehicle I could see the light again, flickering in the third-floor window like a modern-day will-o'-the-wisp. I opened the trunk and grabbed the black satchel inside. Once inside the building, I navigated through the grime and decay to the black hole in the wall that led down to the basement. Thank God for flashlights, I thought. The darkness there seemed palpable, like it was a living entity all its own. I started down the steps, 10 in all, and counted each as I went. If I were to lose my light source for any reason, or if I was running, I'd at least have a decent chance of getting back up the stairs without falling and hurting myself. I had also noted that it was 22 steps roughly from the door to the basement stairs. You can never be too careful. Once I made it down, I felt the grit of soil beneath my boots. I guess it made sense that the basement wasn't fully complete in a building as old as this. Surprisingly, it was relatively clean down there, but that was the only positive. The air was damp and musty and heavy with the weight of the building's history. As I swung my flashlight, the darkness retreated on cue, but grudgingly. Old equipment littered the floor along with some decayed furniture and other furnishings. I didn't see any filing cabinets, though. No papers, folders, nothing. I cursed myself silently for thinking this was a good idea, but pressed on. The second room felt darker than the first somehow. A cabinet had overturned and there were broken vials and bottles littering the ground. I stepped around them and was surprised when there wasn't another door in front of me, just an old coal stove, flanked on either side by piles of old bricks and some old rafters. The stairs to the basement were in the back of the building and I knew I hadn't made it back to the front. I doubled back and made sure there were no other rooms or passageways before heading back to the room with the stove. I shined my light around. I noticed the back wall was brick and that there was a crack running up from behind the stove halfway to the ceiling. Immediately I began removing bricks from the pile in front of the wall until I had enough room to slowly nudge the iron stove out of the way. It was just as I had thought. At some point this basement had flooded, eroding the earth beneath the brick wall and causing the bricks to crack, since the wall had no weight to hold it. I had done construction in the past and had seen this before. This wall had been built shoddily and probably in a hurry. At the bottom, the bricks weren't being held together by mortar at all, and a few light kicks created just what I needed to proceed. A passageway, under the old brick wall, into hell, for all I knew. My heart was pounding and I absolutely did not want to go in. I have no trouble admitting that now. I had come too far to turn back, though. So, I got on my hands and knees and crawled through the small opening. As I stood up and dusted myself off, my heart froze in my chest. Filing cabinets, rows of them. They were similar to the kind offices used today, except they were made of solid wood, probably oak, and very well preserved for their age. They had brass plates on the outside with descriptions. The room appeared to be untouched after all these years. Mary had been right. I walked along the wall quickly, not wanting to waste any more time in this place than I had to, until I found the cabinet I was looking for, the one marked experimental. Experimental. The word itself seemed evil, somehow. I slowly opened it, and over the creak of wood sliding on wood, I thought I heard the faint laughter of children. A cold sweat broke out over the skin of my arms and I got the feeling that I was being watched. I grabbed as many files as I could fit in my satchel, closed the drawer, and turned to leave. That's when I saw them. In the middle of the room, standing perfectly still, was a group of children. I was paralyzed, not by any external force, but by the grip of unadulterated fear. They looked back at me, eyes blinking almost in unison, with gleeful smiles. Then, it was as if a record skipped and the children standing there changed. I recoiled in horror as I realized what I was seeing. The girl standing in front had 2 blank, scarred holes for her eyes. The younger boy next to her waved, his hand bearing only 2 fingers and a thumb. Another boy was on the floor, pulling himself forward with the stumps of 2 missing legs dragging behind. There were others in the same condition. The record skipped again and they were whole, all standing still again, grinning from ear to ear. I found my body could move again, so I turned and ran as fast as any human ever had before, crawling under the wall before sprinting the rest of the way out of that godforsaken building, back through the basement, 10 steps up, 22 steps out. As I ran, I heard the children singing behind me. As it got louder, I realized it wasn't a song, but a nursery rhyme, one that still haunts me to this very day, 1 for tongue and 2 for nose, 3 for eyes and 4 for toes, ring the bell, the time is near, ding, dong, Marianner's here. Ding, dong, Marianner's here.